The Boggart of Fairy Bridge, Part 2, by Ben Brierley, narrated by Malc Cowle. The half-round moon was looking with one eye down upon the fairy bridge as Bowley struck into the path leading directly to that haunted spot. If ever there was witchery in its beams, they were full of it then, for wherever the light pierced the branches of trees, it traced a weird form upon the grass, sometimes an elephant changing into an alligator, or a dragon disconnecting its wings and tail and transforming each member into a monkey, a goat, or a wild horse. No star thought fit to hang out its lamp in the bright immensity. It would have burned to no purpose if it had, and that the whole host knew, and consequently slept or sulked till their sister had had enough of it. The night was so still that it would have required a feather or a mirror to discover any action in its lungs, and the silence was so intense as to convey an imaginary tingling sound to the listening ear. Look which way he would, Bowley could behold shapes that were not of this world. The long pole exercise was engaging spirited contention with the lighter weights of the fairy band. Weasel-faced elves in sugar-loaf hats and knee-smalls tripped around on the river's bank, dissolved in mist awhile, and anon were seen whirling round the railings of the bridge like the star-wheel of a Christmas pantomime. If our adventurer was terror-stricken at the sight of these elfin sports, the feeling must have been doubly enhanced when, on looking in the direction of a sloping coppice, the falling mist disclosed the presence of a giant army marching to some unknown battleground. Silently moved these weird columns, ever advancing, yet coming no nearer, until the whole host sank into some mysterious gulf, to be seen no more. Hush! There is a sound as of footsteps approaching. Nearer and nearer they come, and Bowley's pulse beats high. There might have been magic in that sound, for every subject of fairydom disappears at once, as if at the bidding of some disenchanting power. The long pole exercise finds no competitors now, and the star-wheel hath been closed in by a curtain of mist. Hark! The footsteps are getting nearer still, and there is a shadow moving down the path. Bowley hastens to the bridge and waits. Why had he been scared at things so unsubstantial, he wondered, for with the assurance that Matty Charlesworth was the person approaching, his pluck went up to the very tip-top of its register. The footfalls were now so near that he could count each step, and the form of the person that produced them was so distinct that he fancied he could trace the outline of Matty's basket, and almost make out the colour of her handkerchief and cloak. What interpretation would the company at the Jolly Carter put upon his absence, he wondered? Would they have suspicions of his purpose? Would they connect his going out with Matty's disappearance? Were it possible that they should track the girl to the bridge and determine upon interrupting the interview? Bowley did not care. If the fairies were to recommence their antics and the army of giants to resume their march, nay, if even the ghost of the murdered girl was to present itself on the bridge in all its gashed horrors, he could look on without betraying the slightest fear, now that Matty Charlesworth, the flower of Merriton, the flame that had burned holes in the hearts of the old village youth, would in less than 1 minute be in his arms. Bowley was puzzled as to what he ought to say first. "Oh, thou art gummed, art? That would do for a beginning, but what could he find to talk about during the whole of the time they would be together? Oh, he would descant upon the magnitude of certain expectations involved in the death of a rich old uncle somewhere in Shropshire, or upon his own qualifications for undertaking a new kind of work, the difficulties of which had frightened most weavers in Merriton, either of these subjects properly set forth and coloured with the bright tints a lover's tongue had at its command, would so tickle Matty's fancy that her heart would bump down at his feet like a football. And now for the first observation. What? This exclamation was caused by the appearance at the stile of a cap on a very stubby head, and set off by a face that was fit to compete with the harvest moon for size and redness. Over the stile came a pair of feet that were too heavily shod to cause any flutter in Bowley's breast, and when the whole figure confronted him, in all its repulsiveness of white apron and fustian jacket, the two stood staring at each other with an expression of amazement in their looks that was exceedingly comical. "What art thou doing here, Pincher?" demanded Bowley with a menace in the tone of his voice, as well as in the jerking of his arms. "What art thou doing here?" echoed the other, in whom we see the blushing youth we so recently met at the Jolly Carter. "I'm boggart hunting," replied Bowley, thinking by that little diversion to hoodwink his companion. "So am I," was Pincher's rejoinder, and they both laughed at the transparency of the lie they each had adopted. "Hast seen any?" said Bowley. "No, hast thou?" "Aye, I've just let one slip. It said it couldn't tarry no longer. It were wanted somewhere else." "What sort of one were it?" "A two-legged un, as much like a woman as howtever thou seed." "Could it talk?" "Aye, and some tune too. It's promised to meet me every night, but not here." "How were it donned?" "It had a grey cloak on and a red napkin tied round its head, and it carried summat like a basket with it." "By the mass," said Pincher, looking very earnest, "that's summat like one I've just met. Oh, I thought were a woman, and I spoke to it." "Dost know anybody it favoured?" "Well, it were unlike Matty Charlesworth. I thought it were her at first, or else I shouldn't have spoken." "What did it say to thee back?" "It said it had promised to meet thee on bridge here, just for to see how long thou'd wait for now, and I might come and tell thee that it hadna thought thy ears had been quite lengthy. "Thou art telling a damper lie," exclaimed Bowley, gripping his fist and looking very savage at his companion. "Well," said Pincher, with apparent unconcern, "just ask it, next time thou sees it, whether I am or not." Bowley's countenance fell, and he bit his lip as if he intended making a supper of it. "By God, I'm soured," he exclaimed after a good bit of gnawing at his lip. "It were Matty herself at they met?" "Well, I thought it were," said Pincher, and he set up a laugh loud enough to frighten all the fairies away from their haunts. "Thou thou'lt be hanged. Thou knew it were her. I dare say who told thee about it afore I come." And Bowley ground his teeth preparatory to another attack upon his lip. "Well, if it hadn't been for what oo said to me, I should not have been here," said Pincher. "Oo tell our Merriton to morn." "Aye, that oo will. And I's be jawed by everybody, but I'll be straight with her, mind if I dinna." And Bowley smote the rail with his fist, inwardly wishing that Matty's head had been betwixt the two. "I think we may both pull at the same rope." "Why?" "Because oo's sowed me too." "The deuce oo has." "Yai, and the brass counted." "Is not oo a snicket?" "Cap's the very old lad." "I wouldn't have cared if Jamie or Toms didn't know on it, but he'll blether and talk about all winter. It's odds but he'll be brumped with same stick. If I thought so, we'd have a skit out on him that we wouldn't have forgot for a 2-3 rent days, for there's nobody in Merriton that's as boggart-feared as he is." "What's yond?" said Bowley, pointing towards the path along which they had come. "It's either a mon or a cow," replied his companion, and they both held their breath and listened. "If it isn't a Jamie o' Tom's," said Bowley in a hurried whisper, "I'll ate my head. I can tell him by wriggle of his clog buckles. Pull thy apron off, Pincher." Pincher took off his apron, which was a white linen one, such as mostly worn by handloom weavers. Bowley had a similar apron, which he also took off, and he fastened the two together by the strings, making a long white scarf, which lay wrapped round his body. "Up th' edge with it, Pincher," said the latter, placing himself so as to command the bridge, "and mak as dismal a noise as thou knows how when he gets here. If thou were to start a singing, I dare say it 'ud be as dismal as aught thou could do. I'll stand here still as a gate stump, but if he offers to run, and that's very likely, we mun after him, but tak care not to catch him till we han run him fairly down. Now then, he's here." In another moment Pincher had cleared the fence, when, placing himself behind the bole of an old oak, he prepared his lungs for the reception of his boon companion. Presently the figure which had been descried on the path was seen mounting the stile. The head and shoulders were distinctly visible, though the figure, from some cause or other, had paused in its ascent. Yet so much could be observed as to induce Pincher to give one long hideous howl that made even Bowley shake in his clogs. The silence which followed this effort of Pincher's lungs made the stillness more still, and the figure on the stile might have been mistaken for a stump, it was so motionless. At length it made bold to speak. "Is that thee, Matty?" he said, clearing the stile and approaching Bowley. The latter spoke out. "Never mind that cow making a noise," alluding to Pincher's howling. "It wunna touch thee. How long hast thou been waiting?" "Ever sin' I'd my throat cut," replied Bowley, in a deep sepulchral tone of voice. The figure started back. "Jamie O'Tums," continued Bowley, "what dost want here?" "I want nowt," replied Jamie, for Bowley had made a right guess, as the figure turned out to be Jamie O'Tums. "What art doing here, then? If thou tells me a lie, I'll sink up to the neck in blue fire and boiled treacle, and if t'offers to stir a foot, thou lad'll have howd on thee, for he's waiting at back at th' edge there now. Come, what art after?" "A young woman promised who'd meet me here," replied Jamie, terrified into a disclosure of his purpose. "Who is who?" "Matty Charlesworth, who lives at Jolly Carter." "Matty Charlesworth," said Bowley with a shake of his head, "who isna to be won by fair courting. There's too mony chaps after her, but there's one mon, but if he'll do as I tell him, he may carry her off to church any time when he's a mind." "Who's he?" "It's thee, Jamie O'Tums." I'll do it," said Jamie. "If it's now, it'll either break me skin or rent me clothes." "What hast in thy pocket, then?" "I've now but a shilling and some copper and a knife and a bit of clukin." "That is string." "That knife'll cut thy sweetheart's throat, and that clukin'll hang thee, if both are no charmed. Pull 'em both out and put 'em under a stone. The fairies'll come at 10 o'clock and dance around stone, and in morning both the knife and clukin'll be charmed." Jamie did as he was bidden. "Now," continued Bowley, "pull out thy brass and put it under same stone. Come again in morning and thou find it changed. The shilling into a gold wedding ring, and copper into 4 and 6pence, just the price of the wedding." Jamie took out his money and deposited along with the knife and string. "Now then," continued Bowley, "go back to the Jolly Carter. Matty wunna come here, who never intended doing. Go back to th' house, but dunna go in at door. The kitchen chimney's wide and safe to travel. Go down that. A bit of soot'll be nothing to what thou'll get for thy labour. When thou art safely landed, claim thy prize, and Matty'll tumble in thy arms like beef in a wallet. Now then, thou may go. My throat's gone o'er bleeding, so I mun go too. Off with thee afore the ground opens and swallows thee up." In a moment Jamie's heels were flying about his coat-tails as rapidly as if they'd been under the influence of steam. Over the stile he went like a big sod hurled by a strong hand. Up the path he flew, and was soon lost in the mist that gathered about the valley's ridge, the sound of his clogs continuing long after his shadow had disappeared. No doubt Pincher's repetition of his hideous howl somewhat accelerated Jamie's speed, for the sound made such echoes in the valley that had the gossips heard it, they would doubtless have concluded pandemonium had been let loose. The howling, however, was nothing to the laughter that followed. The very moon appeared to close the only eye visible, and indulge in a fit of hearty cachinnation, and if the fairies did not join the chorus, it was because they were voiceless shadows that had no communion but by gesture, and by the various forms they could assume. "Come, Pincher," said Bowley, as soon as he could get his breath from laughing, "we mun be off after Jamie, or else he'll be down chimney afore we getten there, and we munna miss the fun." "Didst thou think he'd be such a yawny as he is?" "No, I didna," replied Pincher, "but what winnow a mon do, ut's getting a wench in his yed, and thowd lad at his back. They are no much o' their own person then." "We us be about square wi' Matty when this job's settled," Bowley observed with a feeling of the deepest satisfaction. "If Jamie doesna break his neck in chimney, we ha' sport ut'll last for a week or two. Tak this apron, and let's be off." The two, full of anticipation of what was likely to be the issue of Bowley's counterplot, left the vicinity of the Fairy Bridge, and made all the haste they could in the direction of the Jolly Carter, first taking care to possess themselves of the little pocket property Jamie O'Tums had invested in the Fairy Bank, and which Pincher observed would afford them a quart or two for to wash the soot down. The Jolly Carter was as noisy as a little bedlam when Bowley and Pincher entered the tap-room. Both feigned to be as scared as new-started hares, and they looked wildly round the room. "What's up now?" stammered out Sogger, whose face had become indicative of a close acquaintance with his pint pot. "Where's Jamie O'Tums?" demanded Bowley. "He crop out about an hour since," replied Sogger. "What dost want to know for?" "Well, me and Pincher here ha' been after hare that's been seen about Fairy Bridge, and we'd just gant thumped up and were coming this way, when we seed a mon that was like Jamie, as two twins are to one another, standing talking to another, that I didna like the seat on." "What sort of a man were this t'other?" "It were like somebody that thou's had some dealings with, Sogger." "Who can that be?" "Him down there," and Bowley pointed significantly towards the floor. "Dost mean old Sooty?" "The same chap. I seed his on as plain as I see that candle now, and Pincher said he seed his tail swinging about like a clock pendulum. Beside that, there'd a smell of brimstone enough for to stifle a nest of wasps." You might have heard a cinder fall from the fire grate, so quiet had the company become. "Could yo hear what was said between 'em?" Sogger inquired. "Aye," replied Bowley, and he spoke in a whisper. "He said that a wench he'd a notion on, and who'd had nowt to say to him, so he wanted thowd lad for to help him a bit. Thowd lad said it were a bargain, but he should want Jamie to go a living with him when he'd done hating porridge here. 'I'll give her to thee,' he said, 'and I'll fotch her afore 12 o'clock this very neat.' Then he went off like a flue of powder, and we seed nowt no more, and neither him nor Jamie." Although Matty Charlesworth had been bustling about the house, as unconcerned as if she had not made fools of 3 of her gorp-seed customers, she could not help wondering at the sudden silence of the company, and the apparent interest with which they were listening to some story that was evidently being told. Leaving the bar, she crept to the tap-room, and had just placed herself in the shadow of Bowley's still erect form in time to listen to the conclusion of his narrative. She turned pale on hearing what was likely to be the issue of her silly prank, and without uttering a word of comment on Bowley's story, or without hinting that she had been listening to it, crept as much as back to the bar, for the moment an altered girl. "Thou's physic Matty yonder," observed Pincher aside to Bowley, "who's getting a dose who winna forget, all at once. Who fathers who'd getten a sniffed at brimstone pot already? Howd thy noise, Pincher. Whisk be straight afore t' night's over. I dare say Jamie's upon th' house now. We'st be hearing summat on him afore long. Hush!" And Bowley set his head to listen. The company had just concluded that they were giving audience to a thumping lie, and were rating the two adventurers upon the transparency of their inventions, when they heard a loud scream coming in the direction of the kitchen. The scream was repeated, and a low moan followed. Up jumped the whole crew, with the profoundest consternation strongly depicted in their countenances, and an evident desire on the part of most of them to make a bolt through the window, as the most convenient method of escape. Bowley and Pincher, obviously the boldest of the lot, made straight towards the kitchen, and encouraged the rest to follow, but not a foot would they stir in that direction, urging as a motive for their apparent cowardice that it was no use their interfering. The old lad were sure to have his own. Bowley was the first to enter the kitchen, where a spectacle was presented to his vision that, had he not been able to account for it, would have overwhelmed him with fright. There was Matty, pale as death, struggling to free herself from the embrace of who or what? The old granny swooning on the couch chair had just breath sufficient to exclaim, "The devil!" ere she became as rigid as a corpse. The company, with two exceptions, would have concluded it to be the same, for the figure that held Matty in an embrace, which in comparison with the girl's struggles appeared to be Herculean, was as black as the blackest of old Pluto's establishment. "Do, Mr. Devil, spare me this time, and I'll never do so no more," entreated Matty between her screams, but the individual whose mercy was thus invoked held her the more tightly in his loathsome embrace, and enjoined her in accents partaking more of the human than the infernal to set aside all regard for more favoured suitors, and throw herself in the arms of Jamie O'Tums. "Oh, don't ask me to do that," entreated Matty. "What for?" demanded the devil. "Because he's so foul," that is, ill-favoured. The face of the man in black grew darker at this, and as he caught Bowley's eye, squinting in feigned terror whilst the rest of the latter's face was endeavouring to check the development of a grin, he began to speak more fiercely and more desperately. "Thou mun either ha' Jamie or nobody," he growled. "Then I'll ha' nobody," was the girl's timid reply. "Aye, but thou'll alter a' that, for when thou sees him again he'll be as nice a lad as ever donned a pair of shoon. As different he'll be to what he were when thou seed him last, as black is to white. If he were as pratty as paint I would no have him." "What, nor if he brass?" "No, nor if he brass." "Then prepare thyself for going with me." Matty set up another scream. "Mester Satan, if you'd rather be called that, do let me off this time," she begged. "I've sinned, I know, but I'll sin no more." "Thou mun go with me," shouted the devil. "Is there no punishment beside that you could put me to, and let me tarry here?" "Yai, either say the lad Jamie O'Tums, or else in 24 hours fra now thy face'll be covered with wrinkles, thy nose'll turn up like a pump stang, thy your'll be as grey as thy granny's, and thy skin were not a wicket full of new put whelps." "Oh, Mester Blackymore, I'll have anybody before I'll go with you, or be foul," screamed Matty in the utmost terror. "Thou'll have Jamie then?" "Aye, if he asks me to mourn, I'll tell him so." "Mind, no running up bargain." "No, if you won't let me go." "Well, Jamie's waiting at Fairy Bridge, where thou promised to meet him. I mun go and tell him news, so good night. Jamie'll be here afore long and claim his bargain." So saying, the sable visitor, preferring an easier mode of egress than an ascent of the chimney, coolly opened the back door and disappeared. Matty, exhausted by her recent struggles, sank terrified and bewildered onto the nearest chair. Bowley approached her. "Matty," he said, taking the girl's hand, "thou sees what thou's brought on thee by making fools of the young lads about. Thou's sold thyself now to one thou'll never like as long as lives." "Aye, I know that," responded Matty, tears following her confession. "Thou's made a fool of me to-night," pursued Bowley, "and I know thou'd rather have me nor Jamie." Matty was silent. "I should think there'd be no hurt in telling truth if thou hast had dealings with th'owd lad," Bowley continued, "and if thou were to speak thy mind now, thou'd say they'd rather have me nor 50 Jamies or Tums, wouldn't thou?" "Aye, that I would," replied Matty, "but it's too late now, thou sees." "Now to sort—" "But a bargain's a bargain, is it not, Bowley?" "Yai, but chetting th'owd lad's better nor sarving him. How could I do that and be safe?" "I'll just show thee," replied Bowley, and he took from his pocket the knife and string and money that Jamie O'Toms had deposited under the stone at Fairy Bridge. "Look at these," he said. "They should have been charmed. I've had 'em from Fairy Bridge, and they belong to Jamie O'Toms. I heard a ghost, or summat, order him for put 'em under a stone, and fairies had danced round it, and by morning they'd a power both to cut love and bind it. This knife had cut love for all the world but one, and this bant, that is string, had bind it for ever to that one. But when Jamie had gone away and followed his master into clough, I took 'em from under stone and spoilt charm. Here they are, thou sees. Th'owd lad's no power over thee now." "Art quite sure of that?" "Aye, as sure as I'm over head and ears in love with thee. Now then, wilt ha' me?" "I happen could no do better," sighed the girl. "Thou'rt no making a fool on me this time?" "No." Nobody heard these confidences and pledges but themselves, for Pincher had returned to the tap-room to inform his companions of the sable visitor's departure, and the old woman still lay as if asleep on the couch-chair. The night was a merry one after the occurrence of these incidents. Bowley, now fully ingratiated in Matty's favour, betook himself to the tap-room, and placing upon the table a shilling and some copper, declared there was corn in Egypt yet, and qualified his declaration by ordering a gallon to wash down owd Sooty and sweeten thous of the stink he'd made. When the company was about the height of their merriment, the door opened, and in walked Jamie O'Toms, dressed in his Sunday best, and with his face apparently newly washed. There was a shout as he entered, for Bowley and Pincher had so far explained the mystery of that night's business as to make the company eager for Jamie's reappearance. The latter looked round at the circle of grinning faces, and suspecting that the secret of his escapade had got abroad, would have retreated had not Sogger seized him by the arm and begged that he would partake of a draught of charmed drink. "How are things going on at Fairy Bridge?" shouted one of the company. "Has that murdered woman been walking about to-night?" shouted another. "A shilling and some copper's very useful when drink scores up," said a third. "Such good for cleaning teeth with, isn't it, Jamie?" "By mass, Jamie," said Bowley, "thou lifted thy shanks merrily when thou were running away from me at Fairy Bridge. How dost think that charm's going on? I reckon thou'll be looking after it in th' morning." "It's no use, I can tell thee. We ain't had this gallon of ale out on it, and rare and good it is." "What dost thou think about my singing?" said Pincher with a wink at Bowley. "Dost think thou can tell difference between it and a cow mooing?" To each of which questions Jamie responded with an emphatic "Galook," as the readiest way of evading further badgering. Loudly Matty Charlesworth laughed as she listened to these observations, for the girl was now herself again, and was attending to the wants of the company with an apparent unrestraint that evinced little consciousness of her having been in such questionable society half an hour before. Jamie Old Tums slunk into a corner and sulked the night out, and whenever Bowley railed him about the brand new loots he was to have assumed the morning following, he turned upon his tormentor with a ferocious grin and vowed he would have a reckoning with all lot afore long. The sequel to this Marlock requires little telling. From that night Matty Charlesworth and Bowley were looked upon as an affianced pair. They had been seen on moonlight nights strolling together in the direction of Fairy Bridge, and it was even rumoured that the banns had been ordered to be put up at church. No doubt the affair would have ended in marriage, had not an unexpected event completely cut off all chances of such a consummation taking place. The year following, Bowley disappeared. No one knew whither he had gone, but it was supposed he had enlisted in the army, for a person answering his description had been met with in the East Indies, where he had married a native. Matty Charlesworth never would believe this story. She had faith in his again turning up, free and willing, and was determined to wait until the last hope had disappeared. Fate hath not yet ordained that her hope should be realized. Bowley is still absent, and she is still single, and as saucy as ever.